Hey guys, it's Simmer with Boli. We started Muse back in February as a regularly curated playlist that would highlight the musical tastes and identities of various movers and shakers in our Punjabi community. We were very lucky that our first playlist was curated by the up and coming talented UK producer Amritpal Singh Kullar, or AS Kullar. At that time, he had just released his first project, Grove Lane Tales, and most recently, his single Guns Village. As Boli, a couple months ago, we were able to sit down with him and talk about everything from his musical influences to the song choices in his playlist to behind the scene stories of him making Grove Lane Tales. Highly recommend checking it out. He's a great guy, great conversation. Tune in. ਵੇ ਅੱਜ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਾ ਪਤਾ ਕਰ ਸ਼ਰਮ ਰਤਾ ਗੇਮਾਂ ਕਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਤੂੰ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਪਾਉਣਾ ਏ Hello?
Barry, hello, G.
What's up? What's up? Thank you so much for, I know it's late over there. Thanks for jumping on the call with us. I guess just starting off, you want to tell us about the playlist, tell us about the songs on it. Like how do the like track list of songs in this playlist, like how is that like your footprint, your ID, as a producer?
Firstly, it's shaped like the vocalists that I like, raw, harsh, powerhouse vocalists. And then musically, it's shaped by those kind of songs because regardless of what songs I've picked in there, because I've picked like songs from Gurdas Man, but I've also gone all the way to like Sidhu and Karan or whatever. I think all of them are connected because there's just feeling. There's a lot of feeling in those songs. There's a lot of soul in those songs. One person that I couldn't put it like enough songs in there because they're not on Spotify, but Punjabi MC, as I've said like a million times, the 90s era Punjabi MC, just a different animal, different animal. I was just listening to Magic Dissy, like as I was about to jump on call. There's a song in there called 100% Brandy. It's the Will Smith Summertime beat with sped up Brandy vocals. The amount of soul that takes, right? Especially like with his projects, he'll just have like some random interludes, like some random like chops coming in, like whatever. And it's like so rule breaking, but at the same time, everything's grounded by a raw Punjabi folk vocal. And it's like, I don't know if he intentionally set out to go, oh yeah, I'm gonna take like the foundations of Punjabi music and soul and jazz and put them together. I just think that kind of marriage or that kind of blending just happens naturally because that's what he was listening to at the same time, Hana.
Two songs kind of stick out to me, Sat Soda Suit and Satrange Rang. Those two are dance track bangers. Like for sure people are coming out to dance to. Could you talk about those two in your head? Do you see them as a little bit different from like the other songs you have on there?
Okay, first on the jazzy one, because I had already put in Dolly in there, which I think is one of the most underrated, but also one of the best sad songs like ever. And I thought, okay, that shows one side of Jazzy that we don't really talk about. What's another side of Jazzy which actually we don't also talk about either because the songs that he's known for, Romeo, Rambo, whatever, Surma, are like these gangster, like hard hitting songs.
Mm-hmm.
What's the epitome of happy? And Satrangerang is like that for me.
Yeah.
And it's a song that I'll play and it's like instant, like just joy. There's something about it that's just so like, I don't know, melodically and everything about it is just happy. Lakade Halare by Bidrake is like the same feeling for me. It's like I'll hear that and it's like everything's hitting like a synergy. Like Bidrake is really floating through the beat and the music is really just again just happy and joyous. And it's like a lot of the dance floor bangers you hear today aren't happy. They're like gangster, like shoot 'em up kind of tracks at it, and you don't hear genuinely happy songs anymore. I feel like that whole thing is missing, right? Like in the scene, and it would be nice for people to bring that back as well. Are really essential to like the Punjabi psyche, like what being Punjabi is and what Bhangra is all about, right? Like Bhangra is supposed to be like joyous and like really just sort of uplifting or inspiring, right? Or inspiring, and I think songs like that really do musically really do bring that out.
Like coming as like a non-Punjabi speaker, I was like, what is it that's evoking emotion in me? And it's like the pure joy of the vocalist and the instrumentation. And then like dance, I think, is the vessel to express that, right? But then nowadays, like you said, a lot of the dance songs, even in the Bhangra circuit, that Devam knows this, is like just darker and like a little bit kind of missing that Joyce element, or there's so many layers of effects and stuff and hip hop put on top of it that you lose out what the original song is. So it's nice to see those original songs as you go back and listen to them and be like, oh, that's what inspired the original Bhangra like back in the day.
Those are the songs that make you want to dance. And nowadays, you have to make door mixes to all like the best big tracks to make it danceable. I'm hearing like door mixes of like sad songs. I'm like, bro, what's what's actually going on? Like, are you not paying attention to like what the lyrics are saying? Like, I feel like it's overdoing it when if we just simplify everything, get a happy song, get the right like again, sound selection's important. Those two songs are like the epitome of it. Like Satrangirang, the drums are just like the drum break on that is perfect. The tool on it is perfect. Having all of that together, bringing that sound back would be it'd just be amazing.
You talk a lot about like folk, 80s, 90s being the inspiration. Like, how'd you kind of get introduced to that sound? Was it like through a specific person? Like, I know for me, a lot of my old Punjabi-ness came from my green Dodge Caravan with my dad. So I was wondering if you had a similar story or a similar way of kind of being introduced to it.
Growing up and like around family and like similar to your story, what I'm hearing in the car or when I grew up, my dad had a van. So like we had a corner shop, right? So going to like cash and carries and stuff. What I was really listening to was like UK Bhangra, Alap, Pardesi, Hira, but also early 90s of Hujja. So Surdul, Hunts, Farpajan Man, Durga Rangila, that sort of era. And it wasn't clicking at the time, like not for me at all at that age, especially. At the same time, my dad, who most people know now, Dorky player, he was playing with Jazzy B a lot. So I was going to like those Rambo era shows, huh? And like for me, that album is just the most gangster album ever, right? But at some point, I just stopped listening to Punjabi music. I don't know what it was. I think a lot of people know like the UK sound became very, very stale. And obviously, remember that Just Rain video where he did that parody song? That is genuinely what like 99% of songs sounded like from here. I started listening to hip hop. 2013, Born Sinner came out, J. Cole. That was like my gateway into hip hop, really. Which is the perfect album for it because it had a Nas feature, it had a 50 Cent feature. So eventually 2016, a Short Prince, One Time for Your Mind. Yeah, the True School album. When that dropped and I listened to it, I'm like, what the fuck? I was like, what the fuck is this? Because I'd never really heard a folk vocal before. Like Janike heard like a whole project of folk vocals. And at the same time, it's like the most raw, disgusting hip hop beats ever. Like, especially like Punjabi Surme. Like that song was like, what is going on? And that's really what brought me into folk. And it just changed everything about the way specifically I see Punjabi music.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in quick. So it sounds like what really drew you first was the marriage between production and vocals. And like then you're talking about you kind of lost interest in Punjabi music when a phase in UK production kind of lost touch with that. And then this True School album kind of like brought you back to that.
I think that 2000s era, if we look back now, and there's a lot of nostalgia for it, because that's when we had a lot of live percussion, a lot of live instrumentation, full stop. And obviously a lot of raw vocals, to be fair. We're talking about the Lember era, the Kaka era, really, huh? But it felt like the feeling was missing. Everyone was trying to make a dance floor banger like every week, right? And it was just annoying, especially for someone like me that I was listening to listen, like exclusively headphones, earphones in, just vibing out, Hannah. And that True School album was like, whoa, Punjabi people are making albums like this because there's very few dance floor songs on there. There's maybe one or two, and the rest of it is very much like either down tempo or just grimy beats. And it's like it didn't make sense to me until I went back to the folk era, and it was like, oh, there's no dance floor bangers here. There's like these are like really deep melodic tracks, Hannah. So yeah, that's kind of how it worked.
How do you kind of evolve your music to integrate that new sound into it while still keeping like what's true to you, you know?
I'd say this on my trip to Punjab, we got a cab from Delhi to Punjab, right? So 8 hours. And the radio was playing. I didn't have any internet on my phone. So we had just the radio. I remember hearing that like the Dilly radio thinking, this is bollocks. Like, what is this, right? And I'm thinking, okay, TK, it'll be better in Punjab, right? Every time we've got like a bus or a car and one of my cousins or whatever is playing the aux, I'm thinking in my head, what is this? Like, what are you listening to right now, Hannah? There was no care. They were just like thrown together kind of songs. Like you can tell, Hannah. It got to a point like maybe 2 weeks in, I just asked my cousin, I was like, bro, why do you listen to this stuff at it? And he was like, in Punjab, we only care about lyrics. We don't care. It could literally be a guy beatboxing. We only care about what the geezer is saying. And immediately I was texting people like, yeah, it's an uphill battle. Because like, what do I do in this situation? Like, how do I compete against that? How do I break that? As soon as I got back, I don't know what it was. Within like a week, I probably made more beats than I've made in the last 2, 3 years, Hannah. When I heard all those songs, I think subconsciously I immediately thought, yeah, I could do this better. Like I can do what they're trying to do. Because everything they're listening to is just shoddy hip hop, like really like bland and just watered down hip hop. I can do that better. That's kind of how that came about. So I know if you ask a lot of people and you say, "Oh, what do you make music for? Is it for the money? Is it for other people to hear it, or is it for yourself?" For me, it's for other people to hear it. If it was just for myself, it'd just be on my laptop. I'd have private SoundCloud links. Like I wouldn't release anything. But making music and releasing music, in my opinion, anyway, comes from a certain place of ego. In that you're saying what I'm doing is uniquely original, and people need to hear this. And to be honest, that's what my ego is. My ego is saying, listen, I've got a project, I've got a body of work that other people need to hear because, oh, nothing else like this exists. So again, going back to like Sidhu, Godin, or whatever, for me, they were pushing like genres and pushing boundaries or whatever. I think I could do that in a folk context and it still be very original and still very creative, Hannah.
I think the stories and what you're telling us behind your music, it's so evident why your like EP sounds the way it does. And I've always wondered this is like, what was that like first moment where you were like, okay, I'm really doing this. I'm really about to make a song that's gonna play for everybody in the world, and like I'm gonna meet like Harry Pannu, True School, and like work with them. Like, what was that moment? How did that feel? How'd you get to that moment? Like, if you want to like describe the feeling and the story behind it.
I liked a Check One Records post, right? And within 5 minutes, less than that, really, my dad calls me and he was like, yo, the way this thing happened, True School phoned me, said, what, does your son make beats? And my dad was like, he didn't know, and it like my dad didn't follow me on Instagram or anything like that, Hannah. And like True School couldn't have sussed it out, but he must have just saw my last name, Kullar, and he was like, all right, P, get it. And he was like, yeah, he wants to speak to you. I'm like, shit, okay. Because now I'm thinking I'm probably gonna get a bollocking or something like, yeah, your beats are whack. You should do this, that, and the other. I text him and I go, "You're right, uncle." Like this, that, and the other. And he just said, laughing faces back, and he goes, "No one's ever called me uncle in their lives." I'm like, and then he called me and he was just like, "Yeah, you know what? I think you've got potential. Let's sit down and talk." So up until this point, I'd really only been making like hip hop beats and to be honest, like very like bare bones beats, and I like the hip hop that I've listened to as I've gone over the years. The stuff I listen to today is like Griselda, so like West Side Gun, Conway the Machine, but like Rock Marciano, um, stuff produced anything produced by Madlib, anything produced by Alchemist, like that's my hip hop. So a lot of the stuff I was making was just like drumless sample loops, right? Which from a Punjabi's perspective, no one's gonna get that. Then like the next week, we drove over to Derby and we sat down with him, and this was I want to say October 2020, and he was like, "Listen, I could send you some vocals, see what you can do with it." That's all it was. And he was like, "There's no pressure. If you make something in your own spare time, and he was like, listen, but if you if you flop your uni year this year, I'm never gonna talk to you again. And I'm like, okay. I was like, all right, calm. And that was it. And then maybe a month or two later, he sends me an email with three Harry Bundle vocals, the three that turned out to be on the tape. And I was listening, thinking, what do I even do? Like, what do I actually do? Because I'd never worked with vocals up until this point, and his whole thing was, can you see if these vocals match any of your beats? Now, what he didn't know at this point is I don't have a library of beats, and again, all my beats are just looped samples. So like, what am I actually gonna do? So I realized very quick, like I'm gonna have to make all these from scratch. Like, and I just didn't know how to do it. And it took ages. It took ages. I started with Liquid Swords because I thought Tiga Desi, but Jacked or whatever in it. Like I'll make something Desi out of this in it. And I every single Tolki loop you could ever find I used on that. Every single Tumbi loop you could ever find I used on that. Like every single like Desi sample I ever used, I used on that. And I sent him to him one by one. And each time he was like, nope, nope, nope. I was like, fuck this, I ain't doing this. I ain't doing this. Let me pin that. And then eventually I was like, you know what? Let me try out the People's Court one in it. And got some chords down. Then slowly but surely I added some samples in, right? Which a lot of people aren't going to clock when you hear it, but there's like three or four different like 70 samples in there. And they're all layered quite nicely. And I was like, yo, it sounds all right, actually. And I was like, you know what? I want to use like a rim shot. I want to do this, that, and the other. And as I'm layering everything down, this was like all in like one night. I listened back at the end. I'm like, yo, it sounds all right, actually. It sounds all right. And I sent it to him, and he was like, no, I don't like it. I'm like, what? Like the version you hear like on the tape, he's like, no, I don't like it. No, this is the one. Like, honestly, this is the one. He's like, nah, don't like it. And I was like, listen, just sit with it for a week. Next week, yeah, did you sit with it? Did you show people like, yeah, it's all right, but listen, I still don't like it. And I'm like, nah, no. And at this point, I'm like, how do I say it to this geezer? Like, how do I say it to True School? He's like, this is the one. And I think this is where, if I'm being like 100% honest, this is where like having my dad is a huge benefit, right? In terms of like, might as well just say I'm like a nepo baby, and it like this is where it comes in, where it's like, listen, I can, I could kind of push it in a certain sense because I had that security, right? I was like, no, this has to be on there, isn't it?
Yeah.
And eventually, I think just a couple of weeks went by, and there was no, he didn't give me any agreement. And I just remember randomly he messages me. He goes, "Okay, listen, so you got that one done. What about the next one?" I'm like, "Thank God, that one's done." And then it was at that's the point I was like, "Shit, I've got something here." And I thought it was just going to be a single. I thought, yeah, Tiga. I got my mate's dad to do the artwork, and that was it. It was only until like I can't remember what month it was now, like April maybe. I just on a random one, I opened up it was just called Z Security on my files. I was like, I just opened it up, and I'm not gonna say where the sample's from, but I had like just this piano loop, right? And I chucked it on top, and I was like, whoa, this actually got like the chords completely match. And in my head, I could hear that drum break as well. So I've laid the drum break. It's just two tracks, right? Just got that and that. I'm like, it's done. That's it. And as I padded it out, added the flute, this, that, and the other, I remember sending that to True School maybe a couple of days later, and the reply I got, yeah, this sounds good. I was like, what? That again, that's the point where I was like, yeah, there's something's not right here. Like, I don't know how this is happening. Like, just randomly, like, do you get what I'm saying? And I just had those two tracks, and I had a Liquid Sword sounded completely different. So I had a version of that made, which I don't know if that's ever going to see the light of day, but it just sounds like some Jay Dilla like Mad Lib, really weird. It sounds really strange to be like it sounded like a really strange beat, and it had a lot of switches and whatever. And I thought that was it. Yeah, got 3 songs made, and eventually got an intro made, got an interlude, and I was planning on going to Europe for 6 weeks. So I had a trip planned, and I thought, Tiga, I've got an EP done. I'll just sort it out when I come back, like the artwork and whatever, and we'll have it released like at some point. The day before I fly out, he calls me. We were at the cinema, my whole family, and I can't remember what film. It's some like awful Gippy Goodall film, right? He calls me while I'm sitting there. I'm like, I'll just pick it up. I ran out, picked it up, and he was like, "Listen, that liquid swords trunk, it's not gonna work. Like that's just we can't use that because it just doesn't make sense. Like it sounds too weird." So that day, like as I got back home, and then the following day, I made the beat again. That's it. That's just how it happened. Like I kept the switch in there at the end, obviously, and it turned out to be like beat wise my favorite thing I'd ever made. Like up until that point, I was just like, what? I don't know how I'd made it. Just like a proper random sequence of events that led to making that tape.
The fact that you pushed for People's Court, like I'm gonna be honest, the only reason we're having this interview is because of that song. The other songs are obviously great, but like that one was like, I've never heard this before. I have way more questions for sure. I mean, the first one is why Grove Lane Tales? Where's the name come from? Album art, where does that come from?
So the first title I had was Enter the Dragon. That was like for the longest time, I thought, yeah, I'm gonna call it Enter the Dragon. Like sick movie. And also the reason I knew of Harry Bundle was because of that aka amazing clip where he's like Harry Bundle dropping vocals like a dragon or whatever, and it dropping fire like a dragon. And then I hadn't told like True School this for ages, and then again, like maybe a week or two before leaving, he's like, yeah, have you got a name for it? I was like, Enter the Dragon. He was like, Geezer, that's my favorite film. But listen, make it about you. Like forget Harry, forget the film, make it about yourself. And I was like, shh. I ain't got a clue. Again, I didn't have a clue like where to go with it. And I had a bunch of different ideas. I knew at this point, so this is before the intro and the interlude had made. I knew, like, as I was just exploring my own taste of what I wanted to bring out, wrestling was a big part of it. And I was like, all right, maybe something to do with wrestling. I don't know, like something stupid. And basically that title came about because the first, like, I'd say like a mixtape or whatever that I released during lockdown was called Grove Lane Stories, which was for me a play on like GTA, right? Like Grove Street and this, that, and the other. Like I had that made in 2020. I just kept thinking, shit, man, I blew my load. Like such a bad boy title. Like it's like, let's just call it Grove Lane Tales. Like let me just let me just switch some stories to tales. Let me do that. The title itself, Grove Lane Stories, came about because that mixtape was inspired by Handsworth riots in 1985. So I'm originally from Handsworth. I went to school in Handsworth on Grove Lane, and that's just where I just thought it sounded sick, and that's where the title came about. I remember my mates afterwards was like, "Thank God you didn't call it like Aja Bill or something, like just some next, like like yeah, just freshy like album titles, isn't it?" Like, thank God you did something that's true to you, because I realized afterwards, especially then when I did the intro and interlude, which credit to True School, he was the one that was like, listen, why don't you do an intro and interlude? Like, you got 3 songs here, make it a body of work. When he said intro and interlude, like add that in, it changed it from an EP to the point where you just called it an album. People call it an album to me, and it's like, whoa, like it's barely like 15 minutes long. Like, how's that happened? Did it made just 3 songs sound like a full project that reflects me and what I listen to and where I grew up and the sounds that I grew up on. The photo that's included on it of an old Mercedes, that was taken. I don't know if you're familiar with Young Singh, the DJ. I was at his Boiler Room set it was late 2020 as well, I think. I think it was summer of 2020 or late 2020. And that was just parked outside. So, that looks cool, man. Like the graffiti, like so I just took the picture of it. And I remember that story of Kanye when he was making Ye. And he just like apparently on the way to the listening party, he saw the hills, Wyoming hills, took a picture, drew on it like in the iPhone's app, and that became the cover, right? I'm like, all right, let me just find like a photo of my own album art. Like, let me just find one. And that stuck out. And in terms of the arrangement and stuff, John Kid like wanted to make it look like a vinyl cover. So you got the Super 7 written at the top, like 7-inch EP or whatever. Track list is on there, the sort of sticker. So everything about it screams sort of, I don't know, that sort of vintage look.
I have this key test. If the album cover is good, the whole album will be good because the artist took the time to like make sure that the visual interpretation of the music is carried out.
I think the number one influence on the artistic side, the aesthetic side, the visual side is cinema. Like I'm a massive geek, nerd, whatever. Like I'm on Letterboxd 24/7, like just looking at films, like logging films, ready to watch the next film or whatever. And that's where that really comes from. And 3AM's artwork is from a film from 1934, a French film called La Atalante. I don't know if I was like, it's definitely butchered the pronunciation, right? When I was listening to 3AM, and again, that's the process really. I'll listen to the track and it's like, okay, what am I picturing? What's going on here? And that film really came to my head. And that's how the artwork came about. Because I remember that scene with him sort of drowning and sort of trying to find his lost love, basically. And he's sort of there, like the way I pictured it was like she's there in his head, like she can't leave him alone. And that artwork sort of reflects that because I wanted to do a whole music video for it, right? And the idea I had was like, because I'm into like film photography, I wanted to do like a stop motion style video, right? And I completely underestimated how much film that takes and how expensive film is now. So it was, yeah, that took a lot. And I don't know, like a cliche fight that was shot outside my school. It was sort of like a cliche high school romance sort of like fight happening on the street, and she leaves, and it's a classic like bloke story of you did her wrong, and the one that's upset and down bad about it, like you just sort of like wallowing about like yeah, I fucked up, I messed up. And that's how this video came about. So on cinema, I might as well say like the films that I'm like really interested in and stuff. More old school would be like Ingmar Bergman is just the god, the absolute god, right? More recent films like The Lighthouse, which is just next level, like next level for me. Again, 3M, like aesthetically, I had like these sort of things come in mind, right? And yeah, and ultimately the god is like Scorsese for me. Scorsese's like just every film always a banger. Like yeah, just I don't know. I could talk about it for days, but like cinema for me is like the number one influence, even beyond probably beyond music, to be honest.
What do you study in uni?
I did history. I did history at uni, and in my second year, there was a option to do film and history. So I did that paper, and we watched film. I think it started with Birth of a Nation, like which is that KKK film, right? And Casablanca and this, that, and like Bicycle Thieves and stuff like that. And the specialty that I picked was French cinema from the 1930s. So I did La Atalante, The Grand Illusion, Rules of the Game. Like these films for me are just like too good, right? And I guess I don't know, that sort of ties it, like that does tie in with the music and stuff. And like that really did pique my interest in going back and watching like Bergman or whatever. And like, yeah, it sort of just expands out from there. And actually, in my third year, I did a dissertation on Wu-Tang Clan. So, I mean, it went back, it sort of went full circle that way, and yeah, that was really good as well.
I mean, this EP would sound tremendous on a vinyl player. Is that something that you think you might do in the future? Because like I think your music is so conducive for a vinyl track.
I'm a collector myself, and the amount of messages I got, like maybe a week after release, like, listen, when you getting this on vinyl, when you get this on vinyl, I was like, yeah, chilling, I'll do it. And then I looked at prices, I was like, fingers crossed, the 1 year anniversary. Hopefully, I'll have something by then. And hopefully by then I'll have more listeners in it so they can actually buy it as well. A lot of the stuff that you hear on Spotify is just ripped from vinyl. They don't have the original masters or whatever. So you hear the crackle, you hear like the imperfections, right? And again, that's something I wanted to bring out in the EP, where it's just like it almost sounds in places undercooked. You don't know if I intentionally did that, or a lot of times I didn't intentionally do that. It is genuinely undercooked. That's kind of how I saw it. That's the synergy between a vinyl record and trying to reverse engineer that and create an analog sound.
You listen to something like Bulletproof, or you listen to something like Liquid Swords. I remember like it felt like I was in the recording studio, like it was being recorded for like a vinyl record.
There is barely any EQ. There's barely any tuning. Like what you hear is like what he sang, and that's how it worked in the 80s. They there was no pausing. There was no like, listen, okay, you did the first verse. Let's come back after a tea break. Let's do the second verse. They recorded it in one take with the musicians there, and like trying to recreate that with the EP was. I do think that the further we stray from that, and you see a vocal chain with like 15 EQs on it, a reverb, and like this, that, and the other, it's like you're overdoing it, and you've sucked all the feeling out of the vocal.
For you in your lane, what does being folk mean? What does keeping it folk mean? You know?
That's a really good question, because I, as you've heard in the EP, as you've heard in 3am and the Sufi Tale, there is no live instrumentation, right? There's no dolki, there's no tabla, there's no mandolin, there's none of that, right? And if you asked me 2-3 years ago what folk is, I would have said you need all of those things for it to be a song, Hannah. We need to evolve with the times. You need to, be cognizant of the fact that, but the more you box in folk to that kind of, I don't know, those kind of rules, you make folk more and more of a niche subgenre by the minute, right? Because how many people are actually going out the way to do that? Like the number one thing for me is, if I was describing folk, and I know it's like really wishy-washy and like whatever, it's about soul, man. It's about feeling, right? It's like tapping into something that's like intangible, right? Like again, to go back to Punjabi MC, there's a Punjabi MC song that I put in here with Sounds of the Deers, right? Which is a hip hop song. It's like it's him rapping, and it's a hip hop beat.
Mm-hmm.
It's folk. For me, that's folk. Like
Yeah.
everything about that. I don't know if it's the sample choice or what, like whatever's going on in that song. The fact that it's just made with feeling, for me, is what makes it folk.
What does your dad think about your music? Like, there's no Tolkien and stuff. So, like, I'm interested to see, like, I'm also a percussionist. So when I heard this, I'm like waiting for the beats to kick in. And yet I also don't care at the same time that they're not coming in.
Yeah, my dad, I don't know, just like a legendary percussionist, right? From the UK, and started when he was a kid. And he started with Satrang, then Safri Boys, and like Bomb the Tumbi, Another Fine Mess, that's all him. And then obviously Tolla Vitolla was him, and then flipping, works his way up to like Malkit and Jazzy and this, that, and the other. And that's the context that's what I grew up on, in it. Like, and the expectation for me the whole time was, some Mundawi Mujanda, like does he play as well? I always had that insecurity, or like I don't know, imposter syndrome or whatever. Like, I'm never gonna be as good as him. So what do I do? Because as much as I could practice like for 1,000,000 hours and try and perfect it and do that, this, that, the other, how he grew up and how he played, like completely bunned off school, didn't go university, and dedicated his whole life to it.
Yeah.
If I can't do that, I'm never gonna be as good as him. And my thinking always was, if I can't be as good or better than him, what's the point of me doing it, right? Like, what am I actually doing it for? And like, again, through hip hop, I realized production is kind of where I want to like bring my own voice out, because again, I might not be like a professional percussionist, but I think like through drum arrangements or whatever, I try and pay homage to that kind of thing. Like I talked about it before, Dr. Zeus. I don't know if I added the song. Yeah, Middle of the Yard. Yeah, I did add it. The groove on that and like what he's done in terms of the doubler and the drums on that. Zeus doesn't play an instrument, but there's something about it that makes you think, yo, this guy is this guy like Zakir Hussain or something? Like, how does he know? Like, how does he know what to do there? Like, how does he do that? And that's why, like, on People's Court, I've like intentionally brought the talkie loop at the start. I was like, yeah, bund it off. That's it. It's like 4 bars, and you're never gonna hear it again because it's like at the time I was only making it for like people that knew me or my dad's mates or whatever in it. I didn't think like you lot would hear it, so it was like a big like middle finger to them, like, oh, you thought this was gonna be like a talkie, like you thought you're gonna hear like a percussion like on this song. Nah, it's done. That's it. Drop. That's it. You're not gonna hear it again. So I don't know, rebelling against it and being like, yeah, this is what you wanted me to do. These are the expectations you put on me. Fuck off. Like this is what you're gonna get, right? And yeah, so that's kind of where that came out. And when I showed my dad it, yeah, I was bricking it. I was like, yeah, he's gonna hate it. Like he's not gonna love it at all. His response was, this is completely different. Like what you lot are saying is what he said. It was like, this is completely different. I was like, thank God. Like if he likes it and he sees that, we're done. Like we're off to the races kind of thing. So yeah, thank God he did like it. And
Who would you like, or who would be a dream collaboration within the future? And then I guess what are your future plans, regardless of that question as well?
I'd say I'm gonna say these are dream and like nightmare collabs because I think the expectations when you mention these artists and you see their name, a lot of people have an expectation of what their sound is going to be, and the immediate reaction if it's something different is like, nah, man, we wanted to hear him on that. So number one in that is Jazzy B, edit. Like if you hear a Jazzy B song and it's not Kugiana Jora or whatever, like you're like, nah, man, you should have done that, bro. Like you should have done this, and it's I would love to do something so different and like so completely like left field with him and just annoy people. Like I'd love to do that. And someone else I'd love to do that with is Surinder Shindar. Left field, Prophecy. I'd love to work with Prophecy. Two guys that I love, Himmat Sandhu and Raj Soha, the one that did Jetti last year, I think. I sick vocalists, especially Raj. I think like he's got that back like you like he has that background of coming from a Bhangra team and he's like dropped Bodlis and whatever, and you can see he has that in his vocal, like in his texture or whatever. And back to like what I'm doing next, I like taking my time and I like just sort of if it happens, it happens. Like with the EP, it just happened. And if I sit here and try and force a song out, it's just not going to sound good. A couple months after the EP, True School phoned me. He was like, listen, so do you want to hear some vocals? Showed me a bunch of vocals. I was like, yeah, all right, this is cool. These are cool. These are cool. Sent me a bunch over. And I tried to make ones with every single one of them. Couldn't make anything. Come back a week later. I hear that 3 a.m. one. If you look at the project file, like producers and DJs will get this. Like, there's like 4 tracks. Like, there's nothing to it. Do you know what I'm saying? There's nothing to that song. So for ages, for like a week or two, I was just listening to it like, this doesn't sound right, man. Like, I swear it needs something else. I kept showing people and they're like, no, this sounds sick. This sounds sick. I'm like, nah, I need something else. I need something else. So what if I made it in no time at all? Like, this is what it is, at it. And then we just put it out. And like the response to that one was sick. So I want to keep working that way. I don't want to be like it's corny in it because I'm not on that level, but I don't want to be a slave to the algorithms or like, listen, this trend is like this sound is trending right now. We need a song for this right now. Yeah, hopefully trying to make an EP, trying to make another EP. Because I'm hoping Grove Lane is it's like a bit of a trilogy in my head now. It's a bit like there's like a little bit of a storyline going on or whatever in it. So yeah.
But if you had advice to like producers or like Bhangra DJs or just DJs in general looking to get into the production space, like what advice would you give?
It's so mad that like I'm getting I'm getting asked to give advice because I feel so new to it myself, but from the little I've learned, the music game and your career is going to be a long one. You want it to be a long one, you know? If you come out the gate sounding like someone else and you're like, listen, and you get some quick placements, like, oh, I'm working with this guy now, I'm working with this guy, and all of a sudden you're on however many streams or whatever. A year, 2 years, 3 years from now, when the sound changes, what do you have to show for it? And there's that Punjabi saying, "Lambire Koreanda," right? Like it's a marathon, right? Like you really need to prep yourself for that. And the other thing is, I hate networking. Like I hate I'm really not good at it. Like I'm really bad at it. But I've learned it goes a long way. Like it goes a long way just telling people, yeah, I love your music. Like, what can I do? Sharing people's music or this, that, and the other. It goes a long way. So those two things, and you never know how that might spiral into more collabs or opportunities or this, that, and the other.
Dude, this is incredible. Like, this was awesome. Biggie, Simmer, if you have any more, I think we're like an hour and a half in. So like, again, we have enough to keep going. I'm assuming for 4, 5, 6 hours, and we will. But I think, for me or Viggy specifically, it's gonna take so much time to edit through everything that's been gold and like so good. So like, we should probably start capping it off a little bit, or else we're gonna be in front of our computers.
No, listen, I could be here all night, man. I could if films and like music, I could be here all night. But no, I appreciate you reaching out, man. Like, I didn't know the conversation was gonna go like this, but like the chance to actually curate a playlist this like raw or whatever, and then talk about it long form is something that I've been dying to do. Again, like when I talked about before, music coming from a place of ego, like a lot of this is just from a place of, I don't know, pride and like, I don't know, self-righteousness, where it's like, listen, I want to tell people about my taste. I want to tell people like what I'm into and stuff. And like be able to do that, yeah, I appreciate it, man, massively.